This is the magicwordpodcast.com.
Hello, this is Scott Wells for the magicwordpodcast.com. Today, my guest is Mr. Bill Abbott, and he has come to us actually from Canada, and he is a now citizen, I believe, who holds a green card. We'll talk about that. He's in the U.S. then now. A very funny guy, someone I have known for quite some time. He's worked some comedy clubs. I'd like to talk to him a little bit about that. Perhaps as we go about here today, we're also going to talk to him about being a corporate magician. He does a lot of the same or similar types of venues that I do, and I really enjoy working corporate parties and doing some cocktail parties and strolling as well as after dinner and that kind of thing, plus some other small venues and things that he does. So let's welcome our guest. Please welcome Mr. Bill Abbott. Hey there, Bill.
Hey, Scott.
Glad to have you over here today. So you started out in Canada. I was going to ask you about working comedy clubs in Canada. Did you do that for a while in Canada?
I worked every kind of venue I could get my hands on.
Okay.
But comedy clubs were a lot of open mics. Obviously, were great places to try out material, hone material.
Sure.
Obviously, with a comedy bent, so that was something the comedy had to be in the forefront. So I learned very quickly that I couldn't bring massive props onto the stage and be a magician, quote unquote. I had to be funny first. So that taught me a lot in that venue, anyways. And
well, how did comedy clubs, well, I'm assuming they are not as big of a thing there as what they used to be, just like in the U.S. Comedy clubs, I guess with the advent of the internet and television and other kinds of things and venues in Vegas and whatnot, seems like, again, the comedy club tour is not what it used to be. And so did you, in Canada, have that kind of a tour that you would go from one club to the next and kind of travel around Canada for a while? As you said, you were trying everything that you could, but I'm just kind of curious to know what the comedy club circuit was like back then. What year would that have been approximately?
Well, you're talking probably the 90s for me.
Okay.
So 90s, early 2000s. So it was, I didn't really do a tour because I was in Toronto and there was so many open mic opportunities that I was doing that. Eventually I got paid, quote unquote, but it was more just to get stage time, flight time for myself, for material. And then, I was predominantly a close-up magician doing walk around at parties. I used to walk around at nightclubs all through college. And that was really kind of what I was focused on. And then I realized I really wanted to create a stand-up show. And really the only way to work that out was at either comedy clubs, and sometimes it would be like a coffee shop that would have an open mic, or that would be, so I didn't really travel too far. I mean, I would travel in and around the Toronto area. But back then there seemed to be, the Yuck Yucks chain was pretty solid and massive back then with Mark Breslin. And then there was a lot of fledgling, smaller comedy clubs. And like I said, coffee houses and stuff like that were doing open mics. Just honestly, I would just get my name on the list, walk in, do my set, and just continually try to record what I could, usually just audio record it, and just try to get better all the effects that I was working on.
There's a popular television series you may have seen, The Marvelous Miss Maisel.
I love it.
Yeah, great show. And as I recall in watching that, seems like she was putting her name on the list and it would be further on down. Then as she got more popular, they'd move her on up. And is that the case? I mean, in reality, as far as going in and just signing up, and they decide where they're going to put you depending upon your popularity of being here last time, that, hey, he was pretty good last time, let's move him up, or she was paying off the manager with a casserole or something. I mean, so I just wondered if there was, how did you decide, or how was it decided where you would appear in the list?
I wasn't actively trying to get up the list, so my lack of interest in that regard probably rubbed off on the management, whoever, or the talent, the booker that was there. Once you start doing it and you get some, they see that, oh, he's decent, let's see. And then eventually, after a couple of years, I actually got some offers to do a feature. So I would start doing features. I did headline a couple of years for a couple months. but it was never my goal to create a comedy act. I was always wanted to do magic. And the funny thing was at the comedy club, and part of the reason, the magic is sort of frowned upon was because if you're funny and you do magic, you are the standout of the evening. I mean, it's like a juggler at a magic convention. They're going to be the standout. And I think what happened, I do, and I still have a lot of comics who are friends, but it was a harder road to toe. And my objective was really not to become a comedian. It was to do magic. And this was a venue that was, that had an audience and an opportunity for me to do it. I did have to create, I had a solid 10 to 15 minutes of jokes and without magic, which I think is super important if you're going to go into that field, obviously, if that's the objective.
Right.
But my objective, for all intents and purposes, was to get flight time for the magic I wanted to do, and that was it. I mean, I came from doing kids parties, and I was be doing 6 or 7 or 8 kids parties on a weekend previous to doing this, and I loved it. I loved the throw it in the case, go and do the show, throw it, drive to the next gig, and that momentum and the energy and just the building process of building routines and building a repertoire basically of solid effects that you can literally do anywhere in front of anyone. And the comedy clubs seem to be the best, the next succession. The comedy clubs are, the audiences weren't any harder. I mean,
they're just grown up kids. Basically, you're still doing a kids show,
right?
And treating them like children sometimes after they start drinking a lot.
Drunk kids, yeah, exactly.
Just drunk kids, exactly. I have heard some magicians talk about in comedians, their goal was never, and still is, never to necessarily become the headliner, the one at the end who would do the longer piece, but they want to be a middle. I guess there's in most comedy clubs there'll be someone who is the MC. There'll be somebody new who will come on perhaps and do the first 10 minutes, and then there'll be somebody in the middle, do a little longer, and then finally the feature act. Isn't that basically
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and I love doing 10-minute spots, maybe 15-minute spots. I mean, the feature was about 15, but yeah, 10-minute spots for me was an opportunity to at least work in one solid routine. I would say some jokes and work in a routine. The only issue that I think the hard thing is that when you're in that environment, you kind of get roped into a very specific style. I mean, not that you can't be yourself, but the laughs per minute have to be up there. And sometimes with magic, and I'm learning now about sort of becoming or transitioning into becoming a real magician and doing real magic. And I think that's the real difference, is that when you're focused on the jokes, and I have been for years, even up to this moment. And now, in retrospect and in hindsight and in moving forward and progressing as a, performance artist, I guess, I really am focused on the magic end of things. And a joke can kill a great magic effect, and I mean that in a negative way.
Yeah, you mean people will remember the joke more than they will the trick itself, basically. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, like I would get, even in the past few years, I would do one of the small theaters, one of the small magic theaters here in the States, and I would read reviews afterwards to see what people were taking away from it, and then they would say, "Oh, the food was great, the dinner show, the food was great, and the comedian was hilarious." And I realized, I remember Jack Goldfinger saying, "It's not called the Comedy Castle, Bill. It's not called the Improv Castle. It's not called the Mind Reading Castle. It's called the Magic Castle." And that always stuck with me too, because I always said, yeah, people are here to see magic. They're, if they want to go to a comedy club, they'll go to a comedy club to see, if they want to see comedy, I should say, they will go to a comedy club, but it's not called that.
Well, in LA, I think there is the Comedy and Magic Club, and in fact, the Magic Island here in Houston would advertise on the outside saying Comedy and Magic, the Magic Island, Comedy and Magic. And whenever well, they're not going to be reopening. Long story, but the one here in Houston.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't
All
think this is going to be happening anytime soon, if at all. But anyhow, when they were going to be opening, and I was talking with the owner, and they had hired me to be the entertainment director, the first thing he asked was, do you know comedians? We'd like to have comedians to come in here. He didn't say comedy magicians. He didn't say magicians. He said, we'd like to have some comedians come in here. And I think he was meaning, in addition to magicians, we would like to have some comedians. And I was saying, yeah, I've got contacts who are just comedians, and also on the comedy circuit, I can talk with some people locally who run the improv, et cetera, and try and route them through here then as well. But they wanted to try to re-emphasize the comedy portion of the entertainment of being comedy and magic, having magicians doing close-up and strolling as well as on the stage, but mainly to make sure we have enough variety to bring in some comedians. And I was, of course, saying a lot of magicians do comedy magic, or magic itself is inherently funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we are surprised, we often react not with applause, but with laughter, because we're surprised, Yeah.
Well, even in fear, we react in laughter,
That's true too.
You laugh through a horror movie, because it's it's frightening.
It's frightening. Yes. Yeah. You're not going to be necessarily screaming, be laughing. It's like, what was funny about that? I don't know what was funny. It's just caused me to laugh. Yeah. And, that was another thing. And working with comedians, what is it like then? I know in the past I've heard some comedians say, he's just a prop comic, and meaning a magician who just is doing something with some props, or if it wasn't for the gimmick that he's relying on, he wouldn't be funny. What is your take on that?
Well, my take is that the concept, and it's not entirely wrong, is that you can go to a magic shop and buy material, do the material in front of an audience, get a reaction, mostly favorable, and not put any work into, your character, your personality, your jokes, joke writing, creating either an act or creating a persona. It's truly like a crutch in a way, where you have the ability to, again, just purchase something and do it out of the box, and walk into a room and do it. And myself, I'm to blame as well, because the way that magic has been sold, marketed forever since magic was selling, was that become the life of the party, be a showman. You're now in show business. The funny, I always say that, what's the second thing you buy after an invisible deck?
Business card.
Business cards. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
Business, baby.
That's right. I got the best trick in the world right here.
That's right.
And that's what I'm going to do. I even heard a magic dealer once saying, I would never sell an invisible deck to a beginner who was the first time in, looking, because they would never buy anything else. It's just the perfect trick, basically.
Yeah. So true.
For the invisible deck. Well, speaking of then writing things and trying to have them entertaining rather than just buying a trick of the day and going and putting it in your show that night, which, as you say, you can't, unfortunately. What are some tips or advice that you would have on scripting as far as trying to come up with ideas? I mean, certainly if you do have some venues, as you say, where you can get some flight time and you go out to find these venues, of whether they're going to be at a comedy club or even at children's parties, you can pick up some lines there that will transition well for adults as well, I'm sure. But how do you go about scripting this? And do you have any ideas or tricks on that?
Sure. I mean, if you're starting from the beginning, Eugene Berger was a mentor of mine, and he always said, if you can start with a great opening line that you've created or that sets the premise, and a great closing line, and just have the ability to start in that thing. And remember those two things. Remember your opening line, remember your closing line, do the trick in between.
So the great opening line, of course, is, how's everybody doing tonight?
No, but unfortunately,
that
is the, that can be, it's overused.
Yeah.
But I always remember, I have an opening line to my tossed out deck, and it is, do you know it's physically impossible to maintain a poker face during a high stakes game of poker. As human beings, we have micro expressions, we have tells that give away exactly the type of hand we have, and we can't help it. So that's the hook. That's the premise.
It gets
Once
people
that
interested.
Premise,
Yeah.
It gets people interested. So now you're talking about gambling, you're talking about making money, you're talking about card playing, card cheats, or whatever you're playing. They're thinking Las Vegas, they're thinking high stakes poker table, in a darkly lit room. Their imagination is excited. So then when you're doing something, as I won't call it, I guess I'll say simple as a tossed out deck as an example. It goes beyond what the props are saying. They have a mental image, and they're not. So again, an opening line or an opening, that was more than one line, obviously, but the opening premise sets the stage for the interest level the audience will have. So it's like that hook that grabs them, and then the trick, I feel, holds them as long as you maintain. You're not going to make that opening statement and then pull out the coloring book and say, look, the colors are different. The coloring books, you're going to do something that's correlated. So you maybe do something with some dice, or it doesn't matter. But the point is, if you stay true to your premise, have a great opening line that hooks the audience. Gambling's a great theme because everyone's interested in the gambling theme, and I think some sort of closing line. Sometimes it's just a visual. Sometimes it's but something where there's an end to the premise. Now, when I do the routine I just mentioned, I'm looking at poker tells as opposed to reading minds. So I wanted to show a skill rather than an alien gift, as opposed to so I wanted to show the skill of poker reading, and then I test the audience. So that's the other fun thing too, is that you're testing the audience out. So now the audience is involved integrally because they are now a part of the process. They're part of the.
You've brought them in, and they feel okay. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's any good magic trick does that. And sometimes it's not pick a card. Sometimes they're just watching, but it's that hook, and I think that's the So I think for me, finding a great premise helps the scripting part of it kind of write itself. You know what I mean? So it's like if you find whatever your premise is, if it's teleportation, and you're teleporting this signed dollar bill into a piece of fruit or whatever, it's like it's teleportation. We're going to teleport. This bill is going to visibly teleport from this place to this place. Well, people are, they've seen. If they're our age, they're remembering Star Trek, or they're remembering
science fiction,
or they're whatever the case is. But they have an instant. There's a hook involved that they have now a visual, or they have a mental place to go that keeps them interested.
Well, you're talking about routining also. A routine, but what about? And that's an excellent suggestion. Everything that you have just said there and shared also from Brother Eugene. But what about the overall arc from the beginning of the routine? Let's say 45 minutes later or 90 minutes later, however long your show is going to be. Right. Do you try to keep each of those pieces of the act, that is this routine followed by this routine, in some sort of a pattern that would build and plateau, or have a kind of I wouldn't say a valley, but maybe just so it's kind of flat, but still entertaining and interesting? How would you go about scripting an overall act? Do you try to bring in something at the end that will be a callback from something in the show, or do you do kind of one unrelated thing after another? I'm comparing that for an example. Let's say Doug Henning versus David Copperfield, both excellent in their own way. Doug Henning, it seemed, would do one unrelated effect after another. David Copperfield seemed to have little vignettes that would tell stories, and then have callbacks and things. Both are excellent, of course. It's just they're different styles. So I'm asking you about how you design your act, if it has some sort of an arc.
Well, I try to build it from. I honestly, right now and in the past few years, I've really built it upon the building of the effect level and the impossibility level, and taking it from, something that's I would say simple into something that is truly inexplicable, and that's really my only arc. I guess it's sort of unrelated. And even if you look at Copperfield's, we're thinking obviously of his TV specials, but if you look at his current show in Vegas, there are some unrelated effects that are in the beginning of the show. It's like he's doing an effect. Here's a trick. Here's something else that's impossible. And then the overall arc is that his relationship with his father, his grandfather, and then it's building to a finale, climax. Mm-hmm. And I feel, and that's really, without going into too much, laborsome detail, but essentially what I'm trying to do is I start with something that maybe is explainable, and from it's a surprise, but it's like it's fun. It's not going to make you change your religion, but then later on in the show, I'm going to show you some stuff that might change your religion. I think that's the build that I try to do. I mean, obviously, the thread is me. The overall thread is just me in the show doing these effects, and really my interaction with the audience. I look at it. I look at a show like a party, and this is how I truly see it. I feel like, okay, so imagine yourself, Scott. You've invited to a dinner party to someone in your neighborhood. You don't really know these people very well, but you go to this dinner party. And you don't really know anyone. You're not there with anyone, but there's 8 or 10 people there, and you sit down at the table and you have this amazing meal, and you have some glasses of wine, and you're really feeling good, but you've kind of run out of small talk.
Mm-hmm. That happens.
You're kind of like, and you're trying to, well, I guess maybe I should leave now. What's my exit strategy? What are my closing lines? And then all of a sudden you hear some piano playing in the living room, and everyone gets up and walks from the dining room to the living room. And one of the guests is a pianist, and he starts playing, and you're like, he's really good, and you're really getting into it. And all of a sudden, he's playing some songs that you know, and then there's songs that everybody knows. All of a sudden, he's playing a Billy Joel song, and people start singing along.
Yeah.
Now you're having another drink, and now there's this collective effervescence that everyone is now joined by this moment. That's what I want to do in my shows.
I see.
I see. Strangers and give us all, within a 45-minute period, we all now have inside jokes. There's some characters in the crowd that we've all had some fun with. That's really if there was an overall arc or an overall, I guess that's what I'm trying to do. My father is a professional musician, a pianist, and a composer, and I would see him do exactly those things at a party. He would start playing the piano, and all of a sudden that whole room changed from a bunch of people who were talking about gas prices and politics and, things,
sports and whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Just sort of mundane things that they would talk with anybody else, all of a sudden changing that group of people into a true, once in a lifetime memory, and that's really what that's my goal, really. If there was a goal or an overall, experience I want to create, that's the experience.
And trying to bring people on that journey, starting with an introduction to you and really kind of to each other, so they have a shared experience, so that by the end they're talking about that experience and the journey they have come to the conclusion.
And I think comedy, if you look at comedians for the most part, they're connecting with the audience,
right,
with a shared experience. Oh, don't you hate when you go to the airport and this happens?
Yeah, people can relate to that kind of a thing. Just like
relatable, yeah.
Just like you were talking about the tells or something, people can kind of relate to. Yeah. Everyone will have a different little mental picture, I guess, of something when you start to tell a story, because they are creating these things in their mind, which is different from the person sitting next to them, but they're still similar in some ways. And at the end, they kind of feel like they have participated with that. Even though they're not on stage, they're participating from the audience.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I know you create a lot of things as well, certainly, and have BillAbbottMagic.com, where you've got a lot of really great stuff that's available that you do as well. And some of these things I know are not all your ideas, I guess, or I mean, like Chris Pillsworth and some other people who have contributed and have some great ideas that you market for them. But when it comes down to the presentation, do you spend about an equal amount of time working on these commercially and going out and then coming back and saying, this is a commercial trick, this is something that's in my act and I do, and I've worked out some lines, and do you go ahead, talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I came by it kind of by accident in terms of I didn't wake up as a 12-year-old boy wanting to be a magic dealer. But what happened was my local magic club. I've been doing magic professionally for probably 6 or 7 years, and the local magic club asked if I would come and do a lecture. My friend Jeff Pinsky at the Browser's Den of Magic, and I said, sure, but I'm not going to fool any magicians with any material I'm doing. I'm really just doing, I would say, some standard stuff, but with my own presentations and my own approach to it. And he said, no, that's what I want you to do. I want you to do the stuff I want you to share the stuff you actually do, because, and I said, well, that's really all I know. I'm not a finger flinger. I'm not I would never attempted to fool magicians, or even magician friends. So, it was successful. It was successful for me, but also empowered me, I think, in a lot of ways, to have this feeling that this information that I had gleaned through experience was worth something. And I think that's where that started. And then fast forward a couple of years, I had 2 kids, and in between shows, I would be looking for more work, but then also realizing that there was more opportunities to lecture. Mm-hmm. So, the lecture field, better than I do. So you know that if you're not selling something, you're not really making any money. So I realized that, I need to get some product together. So that's when I started to putting some props together. But the main objective, or the main philosophy behind Bill Abbott Magic and what I had started way back then was like, I only wanted to share material that I'd actually done. I only wanted to share material that had actually been worked in front of paying audiences.
Not just pipe dreams, but actual things you have worked on.
Not brain parts or anything, just actual stuff that I actually done, they actually performed for real humans. And that was always the objective, and still always is. And you mentioned that we have produced several great artists who, like you mentioned, Chris Pillsworth, Peter Samuelson, John Archer, Lou. Oh my gosh,
Sorrento,
Lou Leventhal. Lou
Leventhal,
yeah. Anyways, and I've also worked with Richard Sanders, and so again, all that material is stuff that they have been doing for years. I mean, you've probably seen Peter Samuelson do his gypsy thread routine, which is sort of iconic. And that type of material, and that's when they either approached me or I approached them, because I was like, if you ever want to, showcase this, because, I know most of these guys were doing, and still do, lecture tours of some sort, or they were, they wanted to get put their stamp on this routine, mm-hmm. Make sure that, this was known as theirs. And so that was really the whole thrust. And, we've had, great success in all those areas, and partnering with people has been a big part of that as well.
Well, when you were saying you also use ideas of people who you have seen perform, and sometimes I guess they come to you with an idea because you're a noted dealer of these kinds of things, I guess, most of which are more stand-up type of performance pieces.
We do have some close-up, but the predominant material is for stand-up magic, stand-up shows, larger crowds. Yeah.
So people tell you also about other ideas, saying, I saw this guy or gal do something, you might want to contact them and see if they want to release something, I assume, from time to time. Or do people just out of the blue send you ideas?
Yeah, so like one interesting one is Steve Hamilton, who's a magician from Canada. Someone sent me a video of him at the Magic Castle doing this really hilarious, was doing one of my tricks, was the 5-card box, or the 5-card opener, which is basically a 5-card repeat into a box, and he was retelling how it was the very first trick he ever did. But in addition to doing the trick, he also had 3 costume changes. So he would start with a tuxedo, and then all of a sudden he peels that off, and underneath that is like short pants. The bow tie was still there, and then at the end,
Right.
the little baby sleeper. The very last trick. The very last time, the last phase. So after someone sent me that video, and I was like, I got to get a hold of this guy. This is hilarious and fantastic. I don't know if he has an interest in marketing it, but I thought he really needs to. I really felt like this is something I wanted to do, and I wondered if he had any interest in marketing it. That was
so
really
everything that you see like that is something you would see yourself doing. Hey, I like
100%.
that. I'd like to do that myself, and I can also maybe we can all make some money off of this.
That's the filter. The filter for me is like, ooh, that looks great. That's something that I want to do.
I could see myself doing that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love like Chris Pillsworth. You mentioned his paper bag egg bag is fantastic.
Awesome.
Amazing. And if you look at the engineering of it and the way it's designed, it's simply fantastic.
I bought 2 of them. I want to just say commercially, wonderful. I've been doing egg bag for years. I love Jeff Hobson's. I've got 2 of Hobson's bags. I always have a backup for those things you like the best. I always recommend that you have a backup, and this is one of those things because it is a paper bag. Because paper, I mean, as you had said in the video, you can use it 100 or more times, but still, it's best to have a good backup. And this is just a beautiful routine. And Chris is a very clever fellow.
Very clever. Yeah, he's consulted for a lot of big name, Vegas acts, and he's such a sweetheart of a guy.
Well, his cactus and balloon, of course, is what some people might have seen before, and that was what he is known for as being his thing. And I think he has only shared that with 2 people, one of them Rick Wilcox, and I think it was somebody in China, perhaps.
Right.
So that's really kind of a super secret thing that he does. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
Seen him do that at the 4F convention a couple of times, and wow, it's a fooler.
It's a fooler. It's iconic too. It's such a bizarre image.
Well, there again, see the concept of that. People can realize of the mystery. Basically, you have a cactus and you have a blown up full balloon, and they're in boxes, and you kind of push the box down, and all of a sudden the 2 boxes are one. And when he takes the box off, then now the cactus is inside the balloon and has not popped. And it is a regular balloon. You can pop it. I mean, whatever. But the point is that is a mystery, and people can relate to that and talk about it and explain it just in one sentence. It's one of those things. I believe Vernon or whomever had said in the past about how that you should be able to explain the trick in one sentence, as opposed to he counted down the number of cards, and then I cut it, and then I shuffled. Whatever you want to say. My card was on the ceiling, or that cactus was in a balloon. That's just one of those types of tricks.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really mind blowing, and it's a bizarre image that you can't erase it from your mind. And I think that's part. It's like, I mean, we have obviously had a deluge of watching performers do the Bill and Lemon or whatever.
Right.
But as a layperson, you can only imagine the strangeness of they checked out a lemon, they're cutting it open, and inside is money. What a bizarre. I mean, and that's why that effect is so iconically memorable, is because it's such a bizarre image. It's like cutting. I'm sure the very first cutting a woman in half effect would have been the most weirdest thing you've ever seen. Just because that image is so iconically bizarre,
right?
That you can't get out of your head.
I guess one of the early ones, which we still unfortunately still use, of course, is a rabbit in a top hat. It's like, well, how did a rabbit get in this gentleman's top hat, kind of a thing?
Right.
And so it's again something that could be explained then very easily. It is. Those are the kinds of things, again, that are just kind of iconic. I wanted to kind of shift things just a little bit and talking a little bit further about the doing corporate work. A lot of magicians I know have gone from doing corporate work, magic, I should say, being an after-dinner performer, to being an after-dinner speaker, because you have to carry fewer props and it oftentimes pays better. And so they go from magician to speaker, where they might still use a trick or 2 in explaining something that's a concept or whatever is their subject for speaking. I know you do both as well. And so how did you make that transition, and what was the epiphany that you came to of deciding that's what I want to do?
I don't know if I've actually I've never.
You really haven't converted completely over to that speaking.
No, because I just love magic too much, and I think part of the the appeal of the speaking engagement, other than the fact that you don't have to bring any props and you're not, is that some magicians, I'm just obviously stereotypically, but I'm maybe making a generalization, but I know for myself, there was that moment where I was like, I can actually share something what feels more real than a magic trick that people are going to take away and could potentially better their lives, better them, better the world around us, etc. I never got full blown into the speaking. I mean, I did work for some speaking agencies where they would book me, and I would you know attempt to get the speaking fees that they were getting. But more importantly, what I also realized early on that I really think magic is a gift, and it has the same impact, can have the same impact, and can empower people and do and do all those things that speaking things do, just differently. And now that I'm comfortable in my role as a magician, I think there was moments where I was like, man, I went full mentalism at one point, and now I kind of swung back, and now I'm kind of in the middle again, doing a mentalism and magic mix.
Did you do some comedy mentalism, or was it supposed to be?
Yeah, there was always comedy in it, but I did do straight mentalism and trying to cut out as many jokes as I could, so it was just the impact of the effect. And like I can see the appeal of that when you start doing magic, and then you go to mentalism, you're getting just the crazy reactions where people are mind blowing. It's like, and you realize that some of the techniques are very the same, if not similar to what I was already doing in magic, except in many ways sometimes easier, or sometimes minus a sleight of hand, etc. So there was that that power thing too, where you're all of a sudden like, oh, look at that, I just I've got a tossed out deck, and now they think I'm walking on water. And I think the speaking engagement type of thing, if you have a strong message, and you have a message that you feel you want to bring to the world or people in general, I think that's really important to. I think it's important to do that. But my message is that with love, I want to make strangers friends. I want to create memories in moments, and whether it's an engagement or whether it's a ticketed theater show, I want to. That's my is to create an incredible memory. Have a reason to celebrate life. Have a reason to celebrate an occasion.
So, do you want people at the end of your show to remember Bill Abbott, or do you want them to remember there was this wonderful magician who did such and such a trick, or it's just that, or the memory that I had a wonderful evening one time with a group of friends?
I think as I've aged, I think I've recognized my ego, and I'm still dealing with it. But
we all do.
So, and you have to have an ego to get on stage. You have to have an ego to be in front of an audience and imagine that you have anything valuable to give them or to show them.
Well, you have to have an ego, first of all, even to get booked, because when people call you, you want that to be the last call. And so you have to think enough of yourself to say, yeah, you don't need to call anybody else. I'm the person you need. This should be your first and last call, or if you already made 3 or 4 others, you don't need to make another one. You've just got the right guy. Likewise, whenever you're doing a cocktail party or a restaurant and you're walking up to a group, you've got to think that what you have to say and to show them is more important than whatever they're talking about. There's some business deal, or someone saying, I've just had a bad experience with this, or got this diagnosis back from the doctor. It's like, well, I'm here to let you have fun. And you got to have that big ego,
Sure. I think an ego unchecked is not a good thing, but getting back to the original question, or answer to the question, is that without an ego, it's impossible to do what we do.
Right.
So my ego says, yes, of course I want them to remember Bill Abbott. I want them to remember Bill Abbott over, the rubber chicken they just had at the banquet. I want them to remember, and if there's another performer, I want to try to do my best so they remember me at the end of the evening. I've gotten away from that because I feel that gets in the way. For me, it gets in the way of really doing a great show, for the reason, like I mentioned, but expressing through love and excitement the art of magic in a way that it brings the audience together. And that's really because if it's all about the performer, I feel, yes, they're brought together, but there's an emptiness afterwards. There's a feeling of like, yeah, that guy was good, but there wasn't the feeling of like, we just laughed our heads off and we had a great time. And I don't know how the tricks were done, but more importantly, my wife and I were celebrating our anniversary and we had the best night ever, because at the end of the day, it's like, are they, 10 years in the future, they're going to remember the evening and the way that they felt. They probably won't remember Bill Abbott. And I'm cool with that. I'm happy with that, because I know I just love performing. I just want to get in front of people and do my tricks and have a good time myself. That became my social life years ago. So for me, I just want to do that. When any opportunity where someone's going to pay me to do that, I'm there. Right. Honestly.
Well, that's the real secret I think magicians don't want to share with the lay public, and that is we would do this for free. Because we love it so much. Well, and just give us that opportunity to hear some laughter and applause.
I'm going to interrupt you, because that's exactly it's a problem when all of a sudden you have two young kids and you've made magic your vocation, you've made magic your career. You then, so when you're saying, I want them to remember Bill Abbott because I need you to book me next year. I need you.
Right.
I need to. Every show is a big commercial for everybody in that room.
Right.
To see what they're actually going to experience, exactly what I do. I don't have to cold call you. I don't have to explain that. Then I do this, and then the lady floats, and then no. You're actually going to see what I do. You're going to feel what I do, and you're going to hopefully feel the value. You're going to feel, the feelings I want you to feel, so that I know you've had a positive experience. And I think, there's two equations. Do we want them to remember Bill Abbott because, Bill Abbott has an ego that he needs fed? Or I think more importantly, over the years, what I've realized is I want them to remember Bill Abbott so that they hire me, and so I can continue to do what I do and support my family. And I think those are obviously two equations, but for both reasons, yes, I want to remember Bill Abbott. That was a long answer to that question, but
of course. Well, I was just thinking also about cruise ship magicians, particularly when I talk with people who have just returned from a cruise ship, and they will come to me and say, "Oh, we saw a magician. We know you're a magician, Scott, and with I don't know if you know this guy or not." And I said, "Well, who was it?" And they're like, "Well, he did this trick with these rings, and they kind of came together." And we can be more specific, because sometimes they will mention a trick which a person is known for, and I'll say, "Oh, was it so and so?" That was who it was, because I know who's working out there. Right. But my point is 99.9% of the people don't remember the names of the magician on a cruise ship. Yeah. But I think they want the people to remember the feeling they had. So when they're filling out the comments card about the magicians, like, that guy was great, or that gal, whatever, they're trying to make sure they have a good experience so they are able to get booked again. They don't necessarily care about their name being known to the general public, because they're not going to get booked to go work somebody's party once they get off the ship necessarily. Right. But they want to be able to be booked on that cruise for a longer period of time, and for the group to know them. So again, they're not trying to, it's not all about them and their name so much as it is about the mystery and the fun and everything that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unless you're on TV, unless you're
right.
You're becoming a household name through the media, through there's people, YouTube. Well,
it's the thing, like Michael Carbonaro, for an example, who's got a name, and he does then theater shows as well. I mean, he's not going to be coming necessarily and performing like a Jimmy's birthday party, get booked. However, there are larger corporations who are going to say, "I saw you on TV," or "I saw your theatrical show," just like Matt King or whomever in Vegas. They get booked to do things outside of the city that I'm sure are very well paying, or else they wouldn't go and do it. And likewise, if you have a name, I mean, people are coming to see Michael Carbonaro show, or they're coming to see Matt King, but they're not coming to see Scott Wells, and they're not going to. And that's the thing. I think if you have a celebrity name, if you will, in the community, people know you, Chris Angel or whomever,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's a different level, obviously, that we're not,
David Blaine or whatever, right?
David Blaine, yeah. And I think that's so. Going back to what you said, I think that's the thing. Is like you're not. Yeah, at the end of the day, I mean, I'm sure people go on a Disney cruise and see David Williamson, and like he's the funniest thing they've ever
Right.
experienced. I'm sure there's people that like, who was the guy's name? Oh, Magic Dave. That's what we're gonna remember. Magic Dave. So, but at the same time, it's like, unless unless it's a name that you've heard, I can't remember what the marketing thing is, but you have to hear something 5 times before it even registers in your brain. So you have to hear it. I'm talking old school, but I heard it on the radio. Then I saw the TV commercial, and then I saw it on a Facebook ad. Then I saw, so like you need to see all these 3 things or 4 or 5 things before your brain actually registers. Like, oh, this is something I need to pay attention to.
That's true, because there are tens of thousands of messages we get throughout the day, whether on billboards, television, radio, when you're driving in the radio, whatever. And unless you start to hear this a couple of times, and let's say you're driving in a car and you hear a car commercial, and then you see a car drive by, and then that evening you see a television commercial about that car or truck or whatever, it finally starts to click. But you're exactly right. I think you have to have that multiple kinds of advertising, which is important, I believe, particularly to gig performers as magicians, to be everywhere you can. I'm thinking, for an example, of Murray Sawchuk. That guy is every place. I mean, he has over 2 million YouTube subscribers, and he is taking jobs wherever. It doesn't matter, as long as they spell his name correctly. He's kind of taken on that position like Houdini or whomever he used to do, and it's kind of like, yep, book me wherever. Reminds me of Uri Geller, for an example. Uri Geller used to, I think his original idea was to take all these photos with all these celebrities, so people would say, who is that with Madonna? Until eventually they'd say, who is that with Uri Geller? Kind of a thing, You just got to keep putting your name out there.
Yeah. So here's a little thing that I used to do, and I actually shared this with, so the 5-card opener that we talked about, the 5-card repeat,
which is brilliant, by the way.
Thanks. So, I won't get into the methodology because that's not what's important here. So what was important to me, though, was there was a callback. So within the first 30 seconds, the audience was verbally and physically involved with the magic show. That's why it was an opener, because it was an opportunity to get the whole audience doing something. So I had this thing where they would pump their fist in the air and say, and everyone says amazing. So that callback that's repeated 3 or 4 times during that effect. And now that callback can be continued throughout the show. So at the end of any of the effect, the through line is that as soon as I put my fist in there, everyone will yell at the word amazing. So it's like this call and response type of thing. Now, something that I've shared and I actually have done in shows, back when I was doing kid shows, is I would say, so it's Scott. So your name is Scott. So at the end of you'd say it, and at the end of this trick, everyone pump their fist and say, "That's amazing, Scott." Now, they're saying your name probably 12 times during the show because they're saying amazing, Scott. And I know a lot of some performers, have used that, throughout their show. Tim Hennig in
Chicago,
just wrote that really great book on performing. It seems, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name.
I know there's a lot of children shows, a lot of high school.
Great. And I saw his
school
shows. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And if you look at his marketing, it's Tim, that's amazing. Hennig, I think it's called, or Tim, that's amazing. That's amazing. I don't know if that, but that's his tagline. And he's, I mean, I don't think I'm giving anything away for him, but he got that from doing the 5-card box, and that was the 5-card opener, and that was his callbacks that kept going and became his tagline, became his corporate tagline, and let's say corporate, but his company tagline. And but that's the thing. It's like having that hook so that you have a memorable thing that the audience can take home. They're like, oh, it's Tim, that's amazing. So when I Google Tim, that's amazing, he comes up because he's Tim, that's amazing, Hennig, or magician. So
that's a good idea, to actually promote yourself using that kind of a tagline that people will remember.
Yeah.
One of the things I do is a Loda Bowl, and I say magic water from Zanzibar. And about the third time that I do, and it's a running thing all the way through my show from start to finish. And about the third time that I do that, the audience will respond. I'll say magic water from, and they'll all say Zanzibar in unison. And that has gotten to be such a tagline for me. I have run into strangers in elevators and shopping malls, I mean, on several occasions. They'll look at me and say, magic water from Zanzibar? You won't remember Scott Wells, but it's like,
Yeah.
Zanzibar?
You need to change your name to Zanzibar. I think that was...
Yeah. So do you do some strolling magic in addition to your after dinner shows?
I haven't done that in a long time. Now, that being said, I still do walk around magic, or I not stroll. I guess strolling magic is that's it.
Yeah, cocktail type strolling. Yeah.
Let's call it pocket magic because that's the best way to put it. So before a show and after a show, I always throw tricks in my pockets to do. Do I do them all the time? Not all the time. I'm rarely paid to do it. I just love to perform, and I love to give people a magic moment anywhere I can. So if before a show I have the opportunity to wander out in the crowd and do some magic, I will do that. And
as a little extra thing, it's not something you've been paid to do, but you kind of got there early and you think, hey, why don't I go and entertain some people?
Well, I got a really lucrative contract several years ago with a group of insurance companies. Insurance companies, I can tell you from going to these insurance retreats, they would do a weekend retreat at some big resort, and they would have the sales this year compared to last year compared to the year before, and their sales are like this.
Mm-hmm.
They continually, and maybe there's a curve up slightly, but they just continue to make money.
Mostly flat. It's continued.
It's a continued, so they had a lot of money. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And what I realized though is that they would hire me for 45 minutes, my 45-minute show. They would fly me in. I get there. I'd be there for 2 to 3 days, do my show once, pack up, get back on the plane and fly back. Now, what I realized though, in the success that I had with doing those shows was I had a solid 45 minutes, but that's not why they continue to hire me. They continue to hire me because at the end of the night, when everyone was gathered in the hotel lobby bar, Bill Abbott was there doing magic, or I wouldn't come out and just start doing magic. I would just hang out, and then inevitably the subject would come up because they just seen me on stage doing my show, and I would sit in the bar for 1 to 2 to 3 hours doing magic for all the attendees at the convention. And I feel like those are the memories I know that they took home. I mean, the stage show is great, but it's the memory of the guy. The guy was in the bar showing us magic all night. It was fantastic, and we know the impact of close-up magic is much different than stage magic. It's intimate. It's impactful.
And if it's improvisational like that, in which you're at a bar and they just kind of say, hey, will you do some magic? You mind doing something? Or it's just organic, if you will, that it just happens. And that's the thing is more memorable. It's just like producing a ham sandwich versus someone saying, I'm hungry, and then you give them a sandwich kind of a thing. Yeah. So this is something in which they are asking to see as opposed to.
Well, have you ever met a human being who's not a magician? I will preface that. I'm not a magician. Who didn't want to see a magic trick. Even the person who hates magic wants to see a magic trick to figure out how it's done. That's
true.
So people, that's what they're thinking. So when you say, hi, I'm Scott Wells, what do you do? Oh, I'm a magician. And I know what you're thinking. Can you show me a magic trick? Because that's what they're thinking. You don't have to worry about it. And I feel like, any opportunity. I got into magic because I love performing magic, and I love the impact it has. I love the reactions that people get from it, and I know the memory, the little memory that's created sometimes. So I feel like I did struggle when I first made magic a career. I did struggle with, well, really, people should really pay me for what I do, and people should pay you for what you do,
of course.
But we have this tremendous opportunity to advertise what we do. Any given moment of the day, we know enough magic, Scott, to sink a ship. I'm sure. We just need to throw some stuff in our pockets or in our wallets or whatever, and be ready to do it, but more importantly, be willing to do it. And this is a big thing with magicians. Like, well, unless I'm getting paid, I am not going to show you any magic. And I this whole gatekeeping concept of like tricks and magic and that, or the concept of that. You have something to share, just share it. And I think there's a bit of a hurdle, as someone who's made his living by magic for the past 20, geez, it's been 21 years now. There is a bit of a hurdle, a mindset that has to change. It had to change in me because I did have a bit of that feeling of like, well, unless you're paying me, I'm not going to perform. But it doesn't mean you have to do your 45-minute show for free. You can have magic to do and give people the experience of magic.
Well, there's a fine line, I think, also, Bill, in which you don't want to be a performing monkey, in which they're going to say, "Hey, do a trick for us, boy," kind of a thing.
Sure.
It has to be at the right moment, and it's kind of like if they ask you again, and then a third time, it's kind of like, "Okay, I'll show you," as opposed to carrying something around, saying, "Hey, let me show you something," and you're foisting your magic on them. They may not even want to see, or just so there. I think the moment has to be right for it to be memorable for them.
Yeah, it's a balancing. It's a fine balance. But it's always a fine balance. It's like it's like courting someone or dating someone. It's like there's a fine balance between going from dinner and a movie to will you marry me? I mean, it's like, and it's the same with magic. I feel it's a very delicate balance that, you don't want to come across like this jerk who won't stop showing me magic tricks, even though I'm trying to leave this grocery store parking lot. I there's that, but then, and I have seen a lot of that, and I think when we're first in magic, I think there's a lot of excitement and a lot of like, of course, everyone wants to see what I have to show them. And I think as professionals, I realized that at some point I had lost the amateur's love for magic and doing magic at one point, and then I had to give my head a shake. This was several years ago, but I had to give my head a shake and realize, when I'm at the airport, why don't I just show somebody something? Because, if the moment's right, I think that's really the key. And something I learned from David Ben in Toronto. He I don't think it's original to him, but the idea that the scene sets the play. I think that's what he said. I'm misquoting him completely, but the idea that where you are in the moment, whether it's the environment, the group of people, basically the setting that you're in, will tell you the type of thing you need to do. So if you're in a bar and there's a stack of bar napkins, you should really probably do a trick with those bar napkins. If you're at an airport and you're waiting in line to do, thing, and you've got your boarding pass and you think of something that you could do with your boarding pass, then you should do something with your boarding pass. That's the, as magicians, we're constantly like, wow, I got my color changing knives and I'm going to do this for every human being that, it's like whether or not it's legal to even carry pocket knives, I'm going to show them anyways. And I think that's taught me a lot. I mean, that mindset taught me a lot about you're in a moment, how much more impact is it that, you're at a banquet, for example, and you're working tables doing magic and you pick up a piece of cutlery and you do magic with it, as opposed to pulling out your deck of cards, which has nothing to do with anything, and doing magic. You know what I mean? So it's like
exactly what you mean.
Yeah. So the power of that, and I guess that's that.
The scene sets the play, as David said. Yeah, kind of a thing.
Yeah. And I think, and anyways, that's the. I mean, obviously, that's different than producing a show where you actually have to have, create your own purpose. And
having a whole thing. Yeah. Right.
But,
well, this has been marvelous. I can't believe I just looking at the clock about how quickly this hour is gone. But as we close, I always like to ask people, since the name of my podcast is called The Magic Word, what is it that's your word or phrase? What is it that is your philosophy of life? What do you live by? It doesn't have to be a word. It can be a sentence.
I don't always adhere to this properly, and I'm very, but I have been trying to. My mantra in the past couple of years has just been to share the gift of magic through grace and love. That's it.
Wow. Well, I think that you have been talking about that. That's been the underlying theme of everything that you've been saying. It's not about me. It's about the experience of my audience and making sure that they are having fun. So, state that one more time.
Geez, I can't remember it. No, I'm joking.
I'll have to play this back.
Just to share the gift of magic that I've been given, that I through grace and love.
through grace and love. That sounds great. Well, thank you very much, Bill. This has been just a marvelous time. I appreciate the time you've shared with us and the advice and all of the stories and things you said here as well. I know the listeners will appreciate this as well. So thanks for being my guest.
Cheers. Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome. It's Over the Magic Word Podcast. That over there, that was Bill Abbott. This is Scotty out. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate you sharing a lot of those great ideas with the listeners and with me. I had gone back and listened to this a couple of times before I put this part on here at the end. That had just a lot of great gems in there, and I hope that you, the listener, go back and listen and pay attention to some of these great ideas and advice from a true pro. Gosh, this is really great. And also, you might want to check out his website over there for the kinds of commercial effects that he sells. It's Bill Abbott Magic at BillAbbottMagic.com. Anyhow, there you go. And also, I want to thank you guys very much for coming back and watching this video then too that we put together. Be sure that you subscribe to the YouTube channel here for Texas Magicians, so that way you keep up to date whenever we have something that's going to be new that is released over here on YouTube. And also, if you subscribe to our pod letter on themagicwordpodcast.com, there you will make sure that you will be kept up to date with who's going to be coming up from week to week, and also some suggestions from the archives. And also, when we have contests, you'll be the first to know about that, so you can enter those contests then as well. We have a lot of great content that is out here already. You can go back through the archives and find over 600 episodes in the past decade. Last 10 years that we've actually put online out there that you can listen to. And for the past few months, we've been actually putting up these YouTube videos. So be sure, again, to go and check these out where you can hear this too. And I know you'll enjoy learning from these masters. And some of them are past masters who unfortunately have left us. But their words and their thoughts, their suggestions and advice are there that you can go back and listen to in the archives then as well. Well, listen, thank you guys very much. I appreciate you coming back again and watching this and supporting us. And if you can, please become a friend of the Magic Word. This way that you can help us with a little bit of your finances. If you are getting something out of this, it's good content for you. Perhaps if you could just share something that's no more than the cost of a cup of coffee per month, or maybe if you can afford a little bit more, perhaps a nice glass of scotch, depending upon how much that you can give, then the amount of the type of scotch would increase each year from an 8-year-old, 12-year-old, 15-year-old, or whatever. You get the idea. Thank you guys very much. So, until next week, stay well, get booked, and remember to share the gift of magic through grace and love. This is Scotty out.